Tor Torkildson, has written a book about Calvin Rutstrum. And I said that all right, right?
Sure.
Okay. So without further ado, I will let you have the floor, sitting or standing, whichever you prefer.
Well, hello, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. Let's start with a question. Who knows who Calvin Rutstrum is? Okay. One of the reasons I wrote the book. Who has met Calvin Rutstrum? Please, somebody. Okay, I would love to talk to you at some point. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to start out a little introduction of why I'm here, and then I'm going to go into Calvin Rutstrum, and then I'm going to go into a little bit about Hovland. Any Hovlanders here? Oh boy. Tough crowd. Okay, if we can, I don't know who's doing the over there. Move on. So in 1969, my grandfather purchased a resort up in Hovland on the lake. So this is it, Nordlofts. So my whole childhood was spent coming up, spending the summers here. And it was really interesting because we had the guests, we had 8 cabins, and we had, my uncle was a department head at Ohio State. He'd bring grad students home. And we had the commercial fishermen, the loggers and whatnot stop in because our family has always had a big happy hour. And the word got out that there was free booze. So, yeah, and so there was a lot of storytelling going on, you know, every day. And I'd sit there and listen to all these amazing people telling their stories. And so I got really interested in who are these people, you know, and I'd hear these names thrown out. Okay. So, and this is my Uncle John, who owns the place now. It's not a resort anymore, it's just a family gathering place. Still have happy hour. And so we have a lot of get-togethers and parties down on the lake and storytell. So my uncle's like a master storyteller, and probably a lot of you know who this gentleman is, Mark Hansen, master storyteller also. So I try to get these people together and to collect stories, because I've always been trying to collect stories. So I have kind of a feeling of like stories I've heard, overheard, or maybe misunderstood. So, you know, growing up, coming to the resort and everything, finally as an adult, I decided I needed to build a house up here. So I built this place up on Tower Road and sold it to the conservation officer, Mary, and moved on my journey in life. Next. Okay, so a couple people that really influenced me. One was Lloyd Henriksen, who used to commercial fish out of Hat Point. So I spent a year with Lloyd, every day up at 4 in the morning, going out on the lake, Washwanigan Bay. And Lloyd was in his 80s at the time, and his wife Fern could no longer go out. So I jumped at the chance, and I spent a year every day fishing with Lloyd. And we can move on. But it was a really close relationship I had with him and the lake. And this is one of the historical characters that I got to know as a young man, Helmer Ockvik. He would come by and, you know, yeah, hey, matey, you know, and he loved the free booze, and he didn't think he was a hero after he saved you know, the crane. Well, he went to try to save a young fisherman and came back, and one famous line that I love though, he came in, he was kind of frozen with a veneer of ice, came in, never found the Kramer boy, but the press came out and chipped off chipped off the ice, and Helmer's reporter asked him, well, did you pray to God, Helmer? He says, sometimes you got to take care of yourself, matey. There's another great shot of Helmer in his boathouse. And as you go up to Hovland, you'll see these names, Ockvik Lane, and, you know, after this boat. This was my real friend, Otis Anderson. When I came home from the Navy, I had $20,000, and I asked my grandfather, where can I get some property? He said, go up to the mill and see Otis. I went up there and I said, can you sell me some land? He goes, how much you got, man? And I said, 20,000. Oh, they've been coming up from the cities. So to make a long story short, there was a little whiskey and a cribbage game, and I ended up with 40 acres.
Wow.
Okay, now we'll move on to Rutstrum, Calvin Rutstrum. After he was a medic in World War I, was in the trenches, had a really hard time, and his partner was from Grand Portage, telling him how wonderful it was up here, the wilds and everything. So he thought, well, I'm going to go there. He was tired of humanity, everything that had happened. So he got on the America and he came to Hovland right after World War I. And he basically got off the boat, helped some fishermen load the crates of fish on and off, whatever. And then he walked up to Tom Lake that first day. Yeah, so I have to, a little caveat here, I've got a really bad back right now, so I might sit down a little bit, stand up if that's okay. Okay. So, yeah, so he came in and with this rucksack and things, he went up, walked up all the way to Tom Lake. And then he got up to McFarland and he built a cabin, spent the winter, and said, wow, this is what I want to do. And he had this basic philosophy that he wanted a life of leisure. And what that meant to Calvin Rutstrum was work 2 to 3 months a year and the rest be out in the bush, out in the wild, and reading books. And later on he was writing. Next. So here he is, and I had a really cool experience because I was starting to research Calvin and found out that he had built certain cabins around the county, and so I went to find them. Okay, we can go on. And these are just classic shots of Calvin, you know, on his book covers and whatnot. So Calvin, when he was 3 years old in Minneapolis, his father died. At age 7, he dropped out of school. At age 12, he was doing expeditions up the Mississippi River. And at age 16, he left to Montana with a 30-06 looking for work. He ended up on a ranch in Montana, you know, did the fence lines by himself with 2 horses. And he just loved it. He loved the solitude. He loved being out there. But Montana wasn't for him. He couldn't get the image of this area out of his mind. So he came back. There he is with his wife, canoeing. So he had several places around. He had in Hovland, up on McFarland and Pine. For a while he was a guide up on the Gunflint. So he was around, but whenever the population started to come in, he would go further north. These are some of Rutstrum's books here. He would bring all kinds of books up into the wilds. He'd read and write. And he started publishing articles when he was in his 50s. And he ended up writing 15 books. And I like to think of him as our Hovland's Thoreau. He, not only was he a philosopher, but he was very, very practical. So if you came up in this country, you wanted to make a canoe, build a cabin, know how to live at 40 below, your man was Calvin. Okay. And this is a good one. You read this book, it's got the designs how to build your own log cabin out in the woods. Okay. So here's the funny thing that happened. One day, there was a rap on my door. And I opened the door, and here's the guy I knew a long time ago. And he just came in, walked in, and said, I hear you're writing about Calvin Rutstrum. His name is Roger Kelly. Some of you might know Roger. And he said, yeah, his cabin was on my property. No. And he brought me pictures. A whole bunch of pictures. Yeah, here. So that was on North Road in Hovland. And so Calvin, he went on to spend a lot of time. He ended up going way up into Ontario just to get away. And he was very upset when like snowmobiles were introduced. He worked with Sigurd Olsen on not allowing airplanes into the boundary waters, different issues like that. So he was really an environmentalist at heart. And he just loved nature. And he would go out and his wife would let him go. And then finally one year, she said, this year's my year. We're going to New Mexico. He's like, I don't want nothing to do with New Mexico. So this last year I was driving out and I said, I'm going to go find this house, this adobe house in New Mexico. And I found it. It was a nice, lovely area, but he could only take 1 year. I mean, he just had to get back to this country up here. And there he is in his Hovland cabin. And his autobiography is just wonderful. I mean, I read all the books and saved that for the end, just to see what he talked about. And so I'll just do a little reading out of his book real quick. The little fishing village of Hovland, reposing so serenely on the shore of Lake Superior, reposed just as serenely on my mind. Perhaps I was thinking about the checkered tablecloth, the coffee table, and the tasty s'more ulcer that had been served to me after midnight by a fisherman's wife. When on our earlier trip, I left the fish company steamer America as it docked in Hovland. I saw too, in my mind's eye, the clear, cold waters of the Flute Reed River cascading down the rock-bound gorge on the Lake Superior watershed, dropping over fall and cataract after cataract as it wound its jubilant way to the clear waters of Superior. But most other people only talk about doing, I concluded, I will do. Now here's the little thing about his philosophy, and this certainly could rub people the wrong way, but this was how he thought. He said, most young men have aspirations to do the unusual, sail the high seas, take a long canoe journey, explore some corner of the world. Some actually do. There are, however, tragically small minority. Too often the pattern is elementary school, high school, college, a job, marriage, children, a bigger home, and an irreversible paunch, a coronary, and at best a dollar legacy. The compliments are a car, a TV set, followed by a color TV set, 2 cars, 2 dogs, a cocktail bar, a swimming pool, regular bridge games, membership in a club. And I must not forget the eternal front lawn to cut that too often brings it on the coronary. This is living after a sort if you are sensually enthralled and monolithically cultured. But what a tragedy that we can write such biographies 40 years ahead of time. Okay, so while I was writing this book, I mean, I was stuck in Hovland, literally, and I'm a traveler. I've always been traveling my entire life, and there I was stuck in Hovland, and I thought, well, this is a good time to do something, and Calvin Rutstrum, so I started reading his books again. And then I started thinking about all the people I knew in Hovland, all the amazing people. And there's a lot of stories that I had been collecting through the years. So in this book, I weave in and out of Rutstrum and Hovland and my own situation day to day. But I became much more observant than normally I would be. I'd go out in the woods every day and really think about things, observe on a deeper level than normal. And so I just wanted to bring up some people that I found really interesting in Hovland. Maybe some of you know Jim Korff. Yeah, so kind of an interesting story. Who knows what story is the truth or not. Story I've heard. He came from Chicago, had kind of an interesting life over there, kind of a gypsy, came out here, kind of a wild man, but an incredible artist. I mean, he's got work in the state capitol. Recognize that fish? Yeah. Okay, next. Here's 2 of my best buddies, horse loggers. Right? You guys know these? Yep. Mark Adams, Marco Good. Great people, worked hard, but storytellers. And these 2, I don't think have ever been together. So I said, I invited them over and said, who else is coming? Got a little whiskey, and boy, the stories flew. Okay, this is Howard Hong from Hovland. So Howard was a scholar, a recognized scholar throughout the world. He was the translator of Kierkegaard, the philosopher. Very interesting man. I went in the post office one day in Hovland. This guy came up and he like pulled my beard. He said, "Are you the writer?" "What are you writing about?" And I ended up house sitting for them. And boy, what a library. You know, I was just dug into that. You ever heard of the trench coat bank robbers? Biggest bank robber in the entire history of the United States for 16 years, and the last one was worth $8 million. So they, decided he wanted a log cabin in Hovland. So I went to Senti, with cash to build a log, and Senti, fortunately, said, "This doesn't seem right." So he got caught. But 16 years these guys went. And here's two dear friends of ours. Amy Nielsen, who grew up in Hovland right on the bay, and now she lives right below us. And she restored a Montgomery Ward's catalog house. It's pretty cool. It's right at the Arrowhead. Check it out. She really did a great job. And I call her friend Denny the Mad Czech. During the Velvet Revolution in the Czech Republic, he was in the army and he drove his tank through the fence and he ended up in Hovland. What a better place, right? Larry, if you ever drove by Hovland, you see all the furs hanging there in the little shack. But what amazed me about Larry is, in the middle of the winter, he never wears a shirt. He's this big Norwegian guy, and I was going on a Viking expedition, and I said, "Larry, I'm going on a Viking expedition. Dress me up." Got all these furs on. I mean, it was unbelievable. Okay, next. Okay, so this is Ole Skraphult. Okay, Ole Skraphult was the most famous Swede in the Midwest in his day. He was signed by Victorola. He toured around in vaudeville, and just was this amazing, person. And he actually performed in Hovland one time. He traveled the country doing all this vaudeville stuff. There's his little group there. So my uncle collects phonographs, old phonographs. He's got several hundred of them. And so I was talking about Ole Skraphult. So one day he said, "Here, this is for you." And he gave me an old phonograph. What's sitting in there? An Ole Skraphult album. So I'm going to play that. And then, I know this is real brief, but later on, when the book is published, I'll do a bigger event where we can go more into the history of Calvin. But also, when this is over, you can ask me some questions as well. But this is an original Ole Skraphult album. You guys speak Swedish? So one thing I've thought, but that I'd like to do, I'm hoping the book will be out maybe in the spring or something, but what I'd love to do is at the Hovland Town Hall, I have all these kind of records and do a big reading with several other writers, and then play these old albums. Have some, I mean, every album, like you have to change the needle. They're really finicky. Any questions? I mean, in those that knew Calvin or any good stories about Calvin, I'd love to talk to him. Yes?
So you mentioned he was married to a Portage person. Who was that?
No, he wasn't married. His partner in the trenches in World War I was from Portage. And when he used to talk about how beautiful and wild it was up here, and he just thought, he was just tired of humanity. That war was horrible, of course, and he just wanted to get out and away from it. So he came up here. Yes?
Do you know who the man was from Portage?
I do not.
How old was he when he came up,
Let's see. I gotta do the math. He died in 1982. Well, he was in his early 20s.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But he's had a long time. He had a house in Cloud Bay. He had one up in the interior of Ontario, and he ended up in St. Croix, down on the St. Croix River, down by Stillwater there. And he built a stone house down there, and it's still there. A friend of mine went and visited it, and a friend here actually went there and met him. So, yeah.
You had cabin on Seagull Lake?
Yes. Yeah, but that was during his gunflint era.
Is his wife still living?
No, she died before he did. And they had no children, so everything went to the Minnesota Historical Society. So that's been a huge resource for me that I've been going through. Interviews, radio, a lot of information to go through. But I also, another thing too, is I really want to bring out some stories of Hovland, because Hovland's important to me. So, and you know, the storytellers, you know, where are they? You know, and so, yeah. Anything else, anybody?
So the books that he wrote, did he have a regular publisher, or were they different?
He has several, University of Minnesota and a couple others. Yeah. And he did, before publishing the books, he did a lot of magazine articles.
Oh.
But what has kind of struck me as strange was how anybody knows who he is.
Yeah.
I mean, he was very prolific in his time, 15 books, you know.
Some of his magazine writing was True Detective.
Oh,
Yeah, well, he was a detective on one of his gigs to make a little money. He did a lot of different things. Just another thing he did was he bought 120 acres on the Flute Reed in Hovland, and he sectioned it off, and he would go down to the cities and go to like a supply store and say, I'll give you five acres if you give me, you know, a lifetime supply of flour and sugar. Same thing with the bookseller. He'd do that, and he kind of pressed him, because it was famous for trout fishing. So he promoted that in the cities, and then got everybody, and he wheeled and dealed a little bit. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll say this while everybody goes in. Oh, there's a presentation now, right?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
eating.
okay.
Nice try. All right. Thank you so very much. That was, yeah. We're gonna have to connect again about the Coffee with Mildred videos.
Yeah, I really would like to do those interviews and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get you on that. Stay tuned, everyone. Tor, Coffee with Mildred.